What qualities does a book need to be considered a work of literature? Google defines literature as written works, especially those considered of superior or lasting artistic merit. In today's video, I'm explaining 5 elements that set literary works apart from other titles on the bookshelf, in my personal opinion. Literary works don't have to include all 5 elements, but they usually include a few of them. Literature includes fiction, nonfiction, drama, and everything in between, so we'll cover a variety of genres. I'm going to discuss a lot of books that I've read and that I recommend to anyone who wants to expand their literary repertoire. The links to those books are in the description below. First up, we have theme. A theme is an idea about the world or the human experience, but a theme doesn't have to be a moral teaching or a lesson. Literature, in my opinion, conveys themes in a subtle manner. Authors usually don't write overt theme statements. Instead, themes are meant to be discovered by the reader through reflection and repeated readings. A piece of literature should take the reader on a scavenger hunt to collect symbols, motifs, character traits, and plot points that all guide them in the direction of the theme. One book rich with themes is Lord of the Flies by William Golding. I'm going to spoil the plot here. The book is about a group of young British boys who are stranded on an island when their plane is shot down during a war. Left on their own, the boys have to come up with some system of governance to make decisions about hunting for food and seeking rescue. 2 characters, Ralph and Jack, are both leaders of the stranded boys, but Ralph represents civilization through his practical, rule-based approach to commanding his assembly, and Jack embodies anarchy by being the leader of a violent, unruly group of boys. So they use this conch shell in the beginning to summon the boys to a single spot, and thus the conch shell becomes a symbol of democracy because whoever holds it has the right to speak. But by the end of the novel, when most of the boys succumb to their internal desires to kill and generate chaos, the conch actually shatters. So the conch shell is a symbol or a clue that the author has planted in the reader's mind as they question the book's larger meaning. In this narrative arc, the author imparts a key theme, which is that society relies on the willpower of every individual to sacrifice their most animalistic, violent desires to maintain order. And all it takes is one tyrant, catalyst, or disaster to topple this very precarious system. In my opinion, the author balances an engaging plot with thematic significance, which is not an easy feat. And you can argue that a popular book such as The Hunger Games is a piece of literature in a similar fashion because it contains themes about class inequality and totalitarianism. But those who might disagree could potentially critique The Hunger Games' blunt and sometimes choppy writing style, which removes some of that subtlety that we find in literature. And our next criterion is actually writing style. This is one of the most subjective factors when it comes to determining what counts as literature, because what is your cup of tea might not be mine. For example, I prefer books written in the past tense rather than the present tense. I have no idea why, but that's just how it is. So when evaluating an author's writing style, we can look at diction, their word choice, their sentence structure, and their unique voice. In literature, all of these elements should work together in harmony to create an overall aesthetic or artistic effect. And I just want to quickly note that the last element, author's voice, is not the same as character's voice. A character in the book might use certain expressions or a manner of wording in their dialogue that reflects their age, time period, social class, etc. But a literary author intentionally crafts that artificial voice. The author's own voice shines through when they're narrating the course of events, describing images, or just pondering an idea. This author's voice may appear through the third person or even through a character in a first-person novel, for instance. Basically, the character's voice and the writer's voice may be blended, but they're not always the same. An author may use figurative language such as similes, metaphors, or personification to create memorable comparisons and pictures in the reader's mind. They might use allusions and hyperbole and alliteration and rhyme and all of these techniques to achieve an overall aesthetic. But sometimes we as readers get so obsessed with identifying these literary and rhetorical devices that we miss the forest for the trees. There's so much more to writing style than a list of techniques that you might rattle off on an exam. I resonate with an author's writing style when I feel as though I can hear their actual voice through the page as if they're sitting right across from me. When you're listening to an audiobook or reading aloud, you can often tell whether an author's writing style is truly compelling. Let me read an excerpt from a piece of literature with what I consider to be an elegant writing style. So this is an excerpt from My Antonia, a 1918 novel by Willa Cather. I had a feeling that the world was left behind, that we had got over the edge of it and were outside man's jurisdiction. I had never before looked up at the sky when there was not a familiar mountain ridge against it. But this was the complete dome of heaven, all there was of it. I did not believe that my dead father and mother were watching me from up there. They would still be looking for me at the sheepfold down by the creek, or along the white road that led to the mountain pastures. I had left even their spirits behind me. The wagon jolted on, carrying me I knew not whither. I don't think I was homesick. If we never arrived anywhere, it did not matter. Between that earth and that sky, I felt erased, blotted out. I did not say my prayers that night. Here I felt what would be, would be. This passage does include certain literary techniques, but regardless, it encapsulates the character's new sense of acceptance and peace with the unknown. The language, simple yet crystal clear and earnest, creates a tranquil mood for the reader too. One of my biggest complaints is when it seems that the author is trying to show off their literary prowess with never-ending sentences packed with obscure vocabulary and extended metaphors, but true literature, in my opinion, materializes when an author is confident in their own abilities but doesn't feel tempted to constantly impress the reader. The third criterion is historical significance. So there are a few ways to approach this. An author may write a book during a particular time period, incorporating events from that time. An author may write a book reflecting on a historical time period in hindsight. Or an author may write a book that is timely throughout the course of history, no matter what decade or what century we're in. To me, one of the hallmarks of great literature is that it showcases an author's awareness of their current moment, the past, or some implication for the future. The Fire Next Time is an example of literature with historical significance. Written by James Baldwin in 1962, or during the American Civil Rights Movement, it contains 2 essays that reflect on Baldwin's experience as a black man living in New York. He discusses the racism he faced in everyday life, including encounters with police and his evolving relationship with religion. Reading this book today will not only offer a snapshot of the past, but it will also make the reader question whether America today truly aligns with the vision that Baldwin articulated for the future, a vision that was rooted in love. Maus is a work that proves that graphic novels can be literature too. Published in 1991, it depicts the author, Art Spiegelman, as he interviews his father, Vladek, about his experience as a Holocaust survivor. The author uses unique textual and visual elements. For instance, he portrays Jewish, Polish, and German people as different animal species to highlight the Holocaust's dehumanizing effects, and overall, the graphic novel recounts historical events in a haunting way. I've also made 2 videos in which I annotated 1984 by George Orwell. I'll put the links to those in the description. And that book, written in the aftermath of World War II, contains so much detail about totalitarianism, censorship, individual freedoms, and other ideas that we are constantly grappling with as a society. Hardly a day goes by without a TV pundit mentioning 1984 on a news network, and that is really a true testament to how relevant the book is today. Our 4th criterion is character depth. Characters in literature should have backstories, hopes, fears, emotions that all make them feel like real people. They often experience changes as a result of the events in the text or their interactions with other characters. The character doesn't need to have superhuman skills, a thirst for blood, a top secret job, or anything else flashy. They just need to feel real. Sometimes authors try to make a character seem perfect and then they just end up seeming flat. Even works that are considered to be in the uppermost echelon of literature fall prey to this. Lucy Manette, a character in A Tale of Two Cities by Charles Dickens, is an example of this. Dickens describes her as beautiful, virtuous, kind, caring, and basically everyone is in love with her, but she's not really interesting or compelling in any way. Dickens would have had to expend more effort and pages to develop her character further, so sometimes authors do have to make sacrifices for the sake of the larger story. An example of a fully developed character is Gogol in Jhumpa Lahiri's book, The Namesake. Gogol is an Indian-American character named after the author Nikolai Gogol, and he initially resents his name, opting to go by Nikhil instead. The story revolves around Gogol's journey to adulthood, as well as his relationships with his parents and various lovers. And through it all, his perception and connection to his culture both shift. His experience echoes that of many children born to immigrants in the United States, which makes him appear all the more real. Lastly, we have innovation. Many literary works are so different from their predecessors in terms of their structure, topic, style, or perspective. And some authors create a work that's so new that it basically belongs in a class of its own. And some authors, just like filmmakers, become known for their innovative tendencies. One such author is Stephen King, the king of the horror genre. His first published novel, Carrie, which is an epistolary novel that includes excerpts from fictional articles and books alongside the main narrative, is incredibly innovative. Before, I talked about the fact that characters don't need to have superpowers to be interesting, but Carrie does possess a telekinetic ability, and this gift serves a greater purpose: to give power to somebody who felt utterly powerless before. The images in the book, such as Carrie's gory prom, leave a lasting impression as well. Another innovative Stephen King book is The Shining, in which the word shining is used to describe the telepathic skill that Danny, a main character, has. What makes this book unique is its combination of supernatural abilities and gothic elements, such as demonic possession and a desolate setting in the form of the Overlook Hotel, which all happen in a modern context. Additionally, the author suggests that all time is one in the hotel, meaning that all events happen at once. The past, present, and future are all blurred. So this makes the reader think about how time is relative and whether there are forces beyond our control that dictate our actions. A lot of people will probably argue that Carrie and The Shining aren't works of literature, especially because these books exist within the horror and science fiction genres, which aren't always accepted in the realm of literature. However, I think that both books have earned the right to be considered literature. It's up to you whether you agree or disagree, but in the comments, let me know if there are any other criteria that you would consider when thinking about classifying a work as literature. Since this video is a bit different from my other tutorials in which I annotate texts and teach students how to write different types of essays, do let me know if you'd like to see more. Please like and subscribe, and I'll see you next time.